Back in 1999, I said I would gladly give up my job if we could get rid of HIV. I would gladly give up my job. And it's 24 years later. I don't see it happening. I wish it would, but I don't see it happening. People have multifaceted issues, and HIV doesn't even hit top 3. My name is Leona Quewezance. I'm from Treaty 4 territory. My Indigenous mother is from Keeseekoose First Nations, and my non-Indigenous father is from Britain and Ireland. I have 4 children, 3 grandchildren, and I work at All Nations Hope Network, and this is my 24th year there. If somebody was homeless, had no income, had no food, had an addiction of some type, and had mental illness, what's the first thing that you would think of in the morning? Would be, where am I going to get water? Where am I going to wash up? Where am I going to eat? Where am I going to get my next whatever addiction it is that they have? There is potential for HIV to be eradicated, for sure there is, with the treatment that's available. Some people are using it. Some people have stopped spreading HIV. Unfortunately, HIV doesn't hit top 3 for people that are homeless. Your basic needs are first, right? Back in the 80s and the 90s, when AIDS started hitting the forefront, like people started becoming diagnosed with AIDS, defining illnesses. It was, if it wasn't like gay men or lesbian women, it was two-spirited people that actually made change.
What was your introduction to like two-spirited, the term?
The way that I understand it today is we all have 2 spirits. We all have a feminine side, a masculine side. And it actually has nothing to do with sexuality, but more of a spirituality thing. I've known many people that were 2-spirited and living with HIV and or AIDS that are no longer with us today, that paved the way to where we are today. It wasn't only Indigenous people, it was non-Indigenous people as well. 2-spirited people, gay people, lesbian people, all of them. They were the movers and shakers. They moved things, they made all of this happen. I used to take people around the province and they'd share their stories with other communities, schools, youth, and show them that you could actually live with HIV or AIDS and you had nothing to fear from them. I remember once I took a young woman, she's no longer with us today, but I took her to a school in northern Saskatchewan and I got her to drink out of my cup, and then I drank out of my cup. And you should have seen the kids. They were just like, we moved them. We moved them mentally and we moved them emotionally. I grew up with alcoholic parents, and I don't blame my parents for anything that happened in my lifetime. I take complete and full responsibility for everything that I did and everything that I chose. My mother was a residential school survivor, and my dad was non-Indigenous, and I never knew my dad. I met him once in my lifetime, but other than that, didn't know him. I started having children at a very young age. By the time I was 15, I had one. 2 weeks later, I turned 16, and by the time I was 17, I had my second. my second daughter. I also have 2 sons, and I've been through a lot in my lifetime. In the first relationship with my first 3 children, their dad, we were just kids having kids. It wasn't easy, but my kids never really wanted for anything. They have really good memories growing up. That eventually ended after 10 years. And then I met another man, and I had another child. Both of the men that I chose to have children with had unresolved issues with their parents, abandonment issues. Both of them had been to residential school. Both of them had suffered some type of neglect or abuse that they had never ever got to deal with. I can't even imagine what my mom endured in residential school that got passed down from generation to generation that still happens today, right? The sexual assault that happens, the incest that happens, the big word that nobody ever wants to talk about that's real. My second relationship was an abusive one, physically abusive one. And I started using drugs by IV with my second partner. I eventually contracted Hep C. And I know exactly the day that I got it and how I got it. I had gotten a letter from my daughters. The letters used to make me really happy to get it, but really sad as well, because I'd never been away from my kids like that. They were living with their dad in Saskatchewan, and I was in Calgary. And he come into the room with a syringe full of morphine, and he said, "Do you want to try this?" And I said, "No." I said, "You know that I don't use that. I don't do that kind of stuff." He's like, "Okay." And then he left the room. And then I thought to myself, well, I could just do it once. Nobody will ever know. My family will never know. My kids will never know. My mom will never know. I'm in Calgary. I'm alone. Nobody will ever know. And then when he came back, he still had it. He still had it in his hand. And I said, okay, I'm going to try it just once. Just once. I gave him this arm, I remember. And I take full responsibility for that. That was my choice. And I immediately got all hot and I immediately got sick. And I couldn't figure out why people like this. I couldn't figure it out. But eventually, our relationship didn't last in Calgary. I came home, one beating too many. I came back to Saskatchewan and he followed me, and our cycle of abuse continued. Certain drugs are like spirits. They're like something that hangs on you. I wouldn't even be thinking about it, and then one day it would say, well, you could just do me once. You could just use once. You know how much you liked it. You know how much it helped you cope with how you were feeling in that abusive relationship. You could just try it. And it followed me around for years. I eventually found out that I was pregnant with my baby. He was my drive. My kids were my drive to quit drugs. And I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I eventually went on the methadone program, and I got off the program and I stopped using IV drugs. In 1999, I started working with All Nations Hope. I eventually started going to ceremony. And then one day I went to my first sweat lodge ceremony up north. And I was sitting in this lodge with doctors, psychologists, CEOs. And they asked me, what are you asking for? What are you presenting your cloth for? What are your offerings for? And I had 3 things that I asked for. I asked for the health of my mom. I asked for the well-being of my children. And then the last thing that I asked for, and it was actually really what I really wanted, was I wanted to let go of my addiction to opiates. Because I hadn't used in a long time, but it was still there. It was always there. So I gave my cloth And it's funny, the lady that I worked with, Margaret, the elder told her to hang the cloth in the lodge. And I went through that lodge, my very first lodge, and prayed. And that's why I believe in our ceremonies today, because I've never thought of using opiates since. It was like setting that spirit free, or maybe setting myself free. My journey's taken me on many different places all over Canada. I've been to Australia and spoken a couple times. Once on holiday, I've been to Alaska. I've been to Yellowknife. I've met beautiful people along the way. And each time I present something and somebody asks me about my story or asks me about hepatitis C, and I share that I got cured, that I went through the treatment and I got it cured. And it's so sad that people are still dying of liver failure today because they have hepatitis C and they drink. Sitting on the board of directors, I learned a lot of things I never would have learned in normal day-to-day living. I've experienced many different types of ceremonies through CAAN that I never would have experienced otherwise, whether it be from the East Coast, the West Coast, Inuit people, listening to their celebrations and their ceremonies of life, and it's been growth. I started going on the land with a group of people and picking medicines. I'm not a prescribing practitioner by any means. I'm still learning, but identifying plants and their use and what they're for, I think is going to help move our people forward in healing, whether it be a physical battle, an emotional battle, or a spiritual battle, or something from the past, right? I think it's going to help them. And CAAN and All Nations Hope are going to partner in doing something like that, where we bring Indigenous ways of knowing and doing and the Western medicine way of knowing and doing. You have one life to live with your body, and it's yours. Protect it. Take care of it. When it comes to having sex, use condoms. I can't say it enough. Use condoms. HIV is for life. Herpes is for life. Some HPV is for life. Take care of it. It's yours. And if somebody, that loves you or says they love you or that you trust says, oh, I don't have anything, tell them, well, let's go get tested and see what happens. If they don't want to get tested, that should be a big flag. Take care of your body. Take care of your holistic health. Look at everything. Look at your spirit. Look at your emotions. Look at your mental aspect. Look at everything. There's 4 pieces to your holistic health. Indigenous healers know lots of ways, and ask questions. Can never hurt, can only help. Take care of your body. You only have one. And there is hope.